This Global PDX Lunch and Learn was recorded on January 21st of 2021. Global PDX hosts Lunch and Learns every month. This session's speaker is Kym Croft Miller, Portland writer, editor, and writing coach.
So the very first thing we have learned, I'm going to just dive right in as professors, is that the brain and the body are not disconnected like we used to think. And so I start all of my classes with a mind-body moment. So I am hoping that you guys don't mind playing along. So if you are able-bodied and you want to, and you can, stand up. And if you don't, that's totally fine. No pressure at all. You can do this from where you are. So we're just going to take a moment and stretch out your arms. Oh, I love it. I'm seeing some people. And then raise them up and breathe as you raise them up. Big breath. And then you can let it out. Just realize I have a shelf over here. Bring them together. Breathe in or out either way. In or out, pulling them back. And just take one moment to know that your whole psyche, body, everything is about to receive some cool information. All right, great. You can shake, you can do whatever feels good to you right now. But we are, as human beings now, ready to learn. Okay, so before I get to the tools, I just wanted to tell you that, actually, you know what I just realized? Wonderful. Jennifer, I have not done the thing that you were asking us to do, so I am not side by side. So for some reason, that same thing is not happening for me. Is everybody else side by side? You can see both?
We had one person who wants to hop in last minute, so I'm just
Great.
doing a little facilitation to get them in,
Okay.
and then I'll put that presentation right back.
Okay, great. That's what's happening. Okay, fantastic. All right, so it's perfect because I want to talk to you for a few minutes before that presentation kicks in about your stories. So I'm so happy that you guys are here. One of the reasons I love teaching writing is because people's voice and people's stories matter so much. And of course, they matter even more right now. One, because we're starved for stimulation, different experiences, travel, all that stuff. And so your story of either how you were raised or where you went or an experience you had, we're burning for as readers. So if you ever felt like, gosh, I have stories in me, but I don't know when to do it, now is a great time. So I'm glad you're here. And also COVID, frankly. COVID is this intense time where we're, as you know, kind of starved for company, but also for other experiences, stimuli, travel. So your stories, again, are just extremely important and valuable, and I want those out in the world. So I'm very happy you're here. It's particularly important to be a really good storyteller when we're talking about international experiences or cross-cultural experiences, or even about something that you know your audience has never experienced. Maybe you were raised on a farm in the Midwest, and most people weren't. I'm from Alaska, and when I got to California for college, I realized that people were fascinated by the lighting in Alaska. It's all dark in the winter and all light in the summer. And of course, being raised there, born and raised there, never occurred to me. So maybe you have a story that other people are fascinated by and want to hear. And being a good storyteller for people that know nothing about your situation is particularly important because they can't fill in the blanks, right? They can't say, oh, I know what he means, because they don't know what you mean. They're not from that situation. So to be a rich, really intricate storyteller is more important when you have situations like that. So I'm going to give you all kinds of fun tools for that. Also, it's, maybe you already know this, but one of the great things about being human is that our stories have the ability to actually make us feel like we've been there. So they've done these studies that say that when you read a story about, let's pick anger, and the person really describes anger well, the part of your brain that is active when you are angry lights up. Now, it doesn't mean you exactly feel the same emotion, but it is active. And that's kind of magical, right? Just think of anything you want your reader to feel. they really physiologically do feel it. So that's very powerful, and I love that. So I wanted to just super briefly tell you who I am, why I came to this moment in my life. I want to go back to a really pivotal moment in my life. I had just graduated from Santa Clara School of Law, and I had been working on that for years. Obviously, it's 3 years of law school. I had been studying for the bar. I had a baby during that time, while I was in law school. So I was cramming, that one. So I was cramming in a lot of things all at once. And I was changing the 11-month-old baby's diaper. There's a knock on the door. I go to the door. It's our big burly mailman. He doesn't like big packages in the little mail slot, so he always would bring them to us. He hands me from the California Bar Association a big envelope. Now I know what that means. That means I pass the bar, because if you don't pass the bar, they send you a tiny little envelope that says sorry, but they have a lot of information for you if you do pass. So that's a moment, right? And I have the baby, and I have this, I succeeded in the bar exam, and I put her down for a sec to open it to really confirm that. And it confirms that. It says, yeah, you passed the bar. And I look down at this baby who has this hope and just innocence and brightness about her. And I realize something very significant. I hate the practice of law. Now, I forgot to mention I'm also $60,000 in law school debt. So that's a big moment, right? So it took me moving to Oregon, year later, all kinds of interesting things, support of my awesome, awesome husband, to become a writer, and to realize that that is what I loved, and that was what I was passionate about, and that helping people, all people, tell their stories is really, really why I'm here. So that is the long segue into why I picked this particular profession, but also why I picked, why I do talks like this, and why I've picked these specific tools that I think can help you immensely in getting to where you want to be. So I promise you I'm getting to the tools, 2 seconds, but I want to have you do one thing for me, which is I want you to take 2 minutes, and I want you to write what you'd like to write about. And if you've come with something written, that's fantastic. That's great. You can write why this is an important story to tell. But just take 2 minutes, I'm going to do it too, and write some story that you think people might want to hear or is valuable to tell. Okay, just one more minute. Okay, so in the interest, keep writing if you're just finishing, but in the interest of getting to know each other, I would love for you to tell me what it is that you are passionate about writing about, what story you think people might be interested in. I almost guarantee they are. If anybody, I'm not going to call on anybody, but if anybody wants to volunteer and just say what you think you might want to write about. Yeah, go for it, Rick.
So I would like to write about how mentors in my life have really made a difference to my life, and encourage others to think about how mentors might have influenced them, and particularly focused on the whole question of how those of us in the older generation might connect with the younger generation to address some of the common issues that we're all facing that were well enumerated in President Biden's inauguration.
Goodness. Rick, please do that. You are not wrong. We desperately need that. Wow. That's amazing. Every now and then, my husband's mom will say something, by the way, you don't have to rewrite the book. I wish when I was younger, I had done this. And I'm so grateful that she says those things because we do rewrite the book. We don't know, right? So that's quite beautiful. Thank you, Rick. Anybody else?
I can go. Can you see me?
Yep. Shannon, go for
I'm
it.
on my phone, so
Hey,
screen
hey.
sizes. I am Shannon, and I want to write about my travels, but as I work in humanitarianism, and so I've been probably like 17 different countries, and it's just and I lived long term in Latin America for 3 years, so it's like, how do I take all of these stories of the people I met and the issues that people face and weave it into one coherent thing that people want to read?
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. And you'll hear a lot in the tools about different audiences and considerations for international stuff. That is wonderful. Yes, yes, yes. Please write that. Okay, anybody else?
I can go. Can you hear me? My headphones are kind of all over the place.
Yep.
Okay, great. So I run an organization called Engines for Change that mobilizes motorcyclists to have positive impacts on the world. And we partner with different nonprofits and organizations who are addressing different social and environmental issues using motorcycles. And I think that motorcycles are a really overlooked development tool and technology in general, both in the US for transportation solutions and in development work in developing countries. So I've been wanting to write basically an industry report that says, hey, you general audience think of motorcycles as a form of commuting or a weekend hobby at best, but have you ever considered the implications of motorcycles as a development tool, as an infrastructure solution, that type of thing?
Wow. And one of the things I love so much about what you're talking about is you're right. We don't think of them that way, right? We have, most of us, I should say, have a very narrow vision of what those do and what they are, and no experience with them either.
Absolutely. It's not even addressed in driver's ed courses unless you take a specialized course. And I'm like, that is just first entry level. Why don't people think about it? So
that's absolutely amazing. Love it. Yeah. Yes, please do it.
I'd like to go next.
Sure. Marianne.
I'm Marianne. I have a nonprofit in Kenya that works with women who've had fistula and young girls who've been sexually exploited. And we're launching a capital campaign to build a home to accommodate more girls. So the story I would like to tell is why it's important for people to engage in our project to prevent the sexual exploitation of young girls in a very risky town in Kenya where they're exposed to being sex trafficked and exposed to drug use, dropping out of school, early marriages, getting pregnant. So I'd like to make a convincing story that would want people to join us in supporting them and helping them have healthier lives.
Absolutely. And one of the great things that I'm so glad that you're here today, because that reminds me that so often when we want to give people information, we just try to give it to them as information. And I love what Marianne said is I want to make a story, right? We are drawn to stories as humans. So if you can make it into a story, that changes the number of people you're going to be able to reach in powerfully. So that's fantastic. Yes. Wow. You guys are writing about amazing things.
I want to do it without making them appear so victimized.
Right. And that's very key.
Run the risk of, I don't know, traumatizing in a way I don't intend to.
Well, and we'll talk about that in terms of your audience, when you think about your audience and what they can take. And there are methods and tools. I don't mention those specifically, but I can weave that into this talk, which is why I'm glad that you're mentioning it, about how if you're writing about something traumatizing, how you weave in scenes of beauty is one of the biggest things you can do to make us continue to read so that we can take it, right? We're a little fragile as readers. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, who else?
I think we can.
Sepide. Go ahead, Sepide.
Okay, well, I think Kirsten was the lady who was talking about motorcycles. She inspired me to share to share mine. So I have a business idea also that I want to try to get some funding for, and it's a concept around creating a collaborative that is helping empower low-income communities and underserved communities with the goal to both empower them to get them out of the cycle of inequity they're in, but at the same time with the goal or with the vision around climate change, which is a fairly more common thread that a lot of for-profit organizations and public sectors are focusing on, but really making sure. So my biggest goal is making sure that while we tackle climate change, that we don't push the bubble somewhere else, which is typically the underserved communities that get get hit for it. So telling this in a inspiring way, and like you're saying, in a way that it's more of a story that is uplifting and not really information heavy is what my goal is. And
would your audience
I think Kirsten, you're talking about.
Oh, sorry. Would your audience be the communities to activate them, or others to be informed about that connection between climate and low-income communities?
Yeah, so I think it's gonna like imagine a honeycomb where your key empowering community is your low-income community that you're trying to work with and empower them, so they have to be addressed. But at the same time, you're really trying to bring collaboration from for-profit sector to nonprofit sector to public sector, health, transportation, all of that. So they all come together with the aim in kind of this, creating this hub. So everyone needs to get on board.
Great.
And like no one is on board other than me.
Totally. And what Every Day is talking about is intended audience and extended audience, right? You have those people that you're kind of aiming at, but also you have a wider audience in mind. And we'll talk about that a little bit with audience as well. That's fantastic. Wow. Incredible. And great timing, as you know, great timing for that topic right now. Fantastic. Someone else had unmuted themselves, gentlemen. On his phone. Do you still want to go? Okay. Anybody else? One last chance. Just want to make sure. No pressure, but.
Hi. Yes, this is Brian. Sorry.
Great. No, it's fine.
Sorry. Actually, very similar comments. Listening to the other people, similar issues. Lots of international experience working with women and kids in developing countries, difficult circumstances, trying to find a platform to let their voices be heard. And this is really more about them than me. It's not about me, but writing in a way that their voices are heard.
I'm so glad you said it that way, and we'll get into that when we go to point of view. One of the tools is looking at point of view differently in your writing, and it's tricky, isn't it? You don't want it to be about you, and yet you're writing the story. So yeah, very, very tricky. So glad you brought that up. Okay, without further ado, we will launch into the stages of, or the first tool, very first tool that I want to talk to you about is knowing the stages of writing. And you all have your own way to your writing process, the way to go about it. But what I've found from a lot of people is that if they don't really explore different stages of how you could go about the writing process, then they're stuck in one that doesn't always work for them. A good example, hopefully this is not yours, but some of my students, when I ask them, what's your writing process? And these are college freshmen or sophomores, is they say, well, to be honest, usually I wait till the last minute, there's a deadline, and I strap myself down, not literally, but to the chair, and I make myself finish it, and then I turn it in. And my point always is, I would hate writing. Like, I love writing, but I'd hate it if that was my process. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the different stages or different possibilities of how you could look at stages of writing. And that is the next slide. There it is. Okay, so this is the judge. And the judge is always kind of in the back of our minds, the critic, if you will, pointing out things that we're doing wrong or things that don't work. So what I would like to see in people, if this is something that sings to you, is that the first stage is really just you writing free form. You writing down in a way that sings to you, that just opens the floodgates. There is no judge allowed. You can't even consider audience. And I know that's a really kind of questionable thing to say, but what happens is, what I find is when I'm doing writing coaching, is when people shift from that first phase where they think they have to really bring in a lot of different elements. Who's my audience? How I'm going to write perfectly. What's my exact venue? Is this going to be a publication? If you start that way, some people never finish. And as well, you don't unlock the imagination that is in there. So what happens is, if you trust me and do this first stage, that I call Dancing through the Daisies, where you just write, and every time the judge starts to enter, you remove it. Not this phase, not yet. What happens is, you may end up only using a paragraph of that, but that paragraph will be better than anything else you could have found otherwise. It unlocks a piece of our imagination and inspiration, frankly, that nothing else can. Elizabeth Gilbert does something like this, and what she likes to think of it as, I sit down and I say to the muse, give it to me. And she just goes. Now, that's not the end, of course. Most people, like me and most humans, have to revise, and you have to figure things out. There is a famous author, I think she wrote a book called The God of Small Things, who never revises and never edits, and never goes back and looks at her writing, but I don't think that's most of us. So stage 2 is the architect phase. And that's where you actually get to reconstruct. You look back with your audience in mind, with the type of publication you want to write for, your aims and objectives. Absolutely, then you start cutting, pasting, reorganizing. But I think what you'll find is there'll be that gem that you can then structure everything around, because you've done that first stage. So this is also a phase to incorporate a lot of the other tools that I'm talking about, like point of view, story arc. You'll see some of that. But that first phase, don't even think about those. You just get to go for it. So phase 2 is architect, and phase 3 is tuning the piano. It's where you're really listening. Hopefully in that phase, you read your work out loud. Completely changes things when you read it out loud, because frankly, you think things sound a certain way in your head, but they don't always. So if at all possible, have someone else read it. My friends unfortunately know I'm an editor, so I get a lot of these, but that's okay. So this is where you look for grammar, where you look for punctuation. Let me stop on grammar for just a sec, which is that grammar is something that it's wonderful when you read it out loud, because sometimes you hear the inaccuracies in grammar. It's also something that, if English is your first language, you kind of know some things innately that, and if English is your second language, then you've learned them, and those things can be significant. So let me blow your minds for a minute, if you'll let me. So most of you that learned English as a first language don't know that there's an order to adjectives in the English language. You absolutely have to put them in the right order for them to sound right to the native English speaker, American English speaker. So let me give you an example. Is you can say, wow, that was a fantastic big yellow bus. But you can't say it was a yellow big fantastic bus, because that would sound weird, right? So a lot of times with grammar, you know innately some things, and there are a lot of things that you'd need to learn, right? So the bottom line to that is, if English is not your first language, it's important to show that piece to someone who it is their native language, because they'll catch those things, right? Stuff that you might not learn. But tuning the piano is word choice, right? Hear the sounds, and that's where you swap out sounds. You do punctuation. I'm a big fan of commas, and we almost always use them wrong. So what I've done for you guys is, at the end of this presentation, I have my 6 power comma rules. I think a lot of us have, it's been a while since we learned commas. We've forgotten, right? So if you almost do nothing else but use commas the way these 6 rules say, you'll get most of them right. There might be a few extra rules, but these are the main ones. So I did them with examples for you at the end. We're not going to talk about it, but I just put that on the end of this for you. Okay, awesome. So I want to ask you guys if there's a stage here that typically trips you up, a stage of writing. Any of them that are ones that are particularly hard for you?
Hi Kim, this is Avery. Sorry, I'm off video. I'm doing
No, it's fine. Hi, Avery.
other things, although you're the listening to you is the priority.
Awesome.
For me, the hardest part often is just getting started. So even though I give myself permission to just sort of like explode words on a page, sometimes just typing those first words,
Yeah.
like I build up the assignment or build up the piece that I'm trying to put together so much in my mind, its importance, and it needs to be perfect. I'm sort of my own worst critic before I even get started.
Yeah, it sounds like the judge, that's a really excellent point, Avery. It sounds like your judge is already working before you've even sat down, right?
Exactly.
So absolutely, if you can say that, judge, wonderful, fantastic, love you, you have a lot of good ideas, not yet.
Yes, don't need
Not
you.
yet, right? Elizabeth Gilbert from Eat, Pray, Love, again, has this talk that she gives about fear. And she says she's a very fearful person. She's lived with fear all her life. And fear is allowed to be in the car with her, but fear is not allowed to drive, and it can't even touch the radio. Like it's very limited. So I think that's fantastic that you can just say, wonderful, great. There'll be a time for you, not yet. Great. Anybody else phase that kind of trips you up? Okay, we'll move on, but at any point, if you feel like talking about that, that's fine too. No problems going back. Okay, let's go to tool number 2. So we've got the phases, and then we have this thing that, again, sounds pretty basic. I think you guys probably have heard it before, which is show, don't tell. I like to transform it as put something into a scene, particularly valuable in international writing, of course. These are things that spaces, places, people, outfits that we might not have ever seen or experienced firsthand. So very important that you take this step. Now, again, not phase 1, right? Phase 1, don't even think about it. Do whatever you want to do. But the architect phase, go back and think, okay, how much am I just telling my reader about everything? And how much am I actually showing my reader things and letting them experience? The real key, and actually we can go to the next slide because I think it outlines this, but the real key is that we as readers, we want to feel clever, right? We want to think we've discovered what you're talking about. He stomped into the room. Ah, he's angry, right? Of course he's angry, but we want to come up with that ourselves. So I want to do just a really brief exercise. It's going to seem remedial, but it helps to practice this because we all think we know this, but then we don't always do it. There's a sentence here on this. If you can't see it, I'll just read it, a couple sentences. And I'd like us to take a stab at transforming those. Oops, there we go. So the sentence is, John walked into the room and looked at it with disgust. It was an incredible mess, but he really didn't want to clean it. John hated cleaning. I want you to take just a minute and take a stab at making that show, not tell. I'll give you a couple minutes. One more minute. Okay. Any brave souls? By the way, there's no right answer to this, not at all. So anybody have the ability or the wherewithal to come up with anything different than what's written here? Something that actually shows a bit more than tells us what to feel.
I can give it a shot.
Sure, great. Thanks.
As John walked into the room, he was overwhelmed with the sights and the smells. A six-pack of beer cans was strewn across the floor. One piece of pizza was left in an empty, virtually empty pizza box, and the room smelled of reeked of day-old pizza.
Fantastic. And you're already doing the second tool, which is hype up the senses. So good. You've got both going on there. Amazing. Yes, we see it's a mess, right? You don't have to tell us it's a mess. We want to go, we get it. It's a mess. Fantastic. Anybody else have a different take or a different way to do that?
Well, I had a little bit different.
Good.
John walked into the room, but he had to watch his step. Garbage was on the floor. Newspapers were piled up. Empty food cartons were everywhere. He hated cleaning.
Great. Great. So you've actually showed us that it was a huge mess. We didn't need to say it was a huge, he didn't need to say it was a huge mess. Fantastic. Did anybody have another way to say didn't like cleaning? Any way to show that? I mean, obviously the mess sort of shows that, but anything else?
Well, you could say something like, it had been weeks since the last time he cleaned.
Fantastic. Okay. So what is a way to show us it had been weeks? See, it's harder than we think, right? We're like, I'll just say it.
Talk about the mold on the pizza boxes and the churning in his stomach as he looked at them.
Something that takes time, right? Mold, something growing, a newspaper from 2 weeks ago. Anything that has us go, oh, wait a minute. That's time has passed. Again, this is a level that is only in the architect phase and in the tuning phase, never in the first. But it really, you go back and you go, wait a minute, am I just telling them what is happening or am I showing them? So, John walks in the room and he, looks at all the pizza boxes and stuff and sighs, right? Anything that says, oh, wait a minute, I don't think he likes this. You describe the mess and then you say, he picked up a dirty dish and he put it back down, right? We go, oh, he doesn't want to clean this, right? This is not of his interest. And then you say exactly what we just said, something that shows the duration, or maybe he says, or maybe the narrator says, John he thought, where are the cleaning supplies? I don't even know where they are, right? Anything that helps us to do that. And again, this is written kind of as a fiction piece, but it works perfectly for nonfiction as well. We want to feel that we have discovered this ourselves. Fantastic. You guys are amazing. Okay. So I want to go to the next one, which is the next tool, which is very closely linked, which is hype the senses. This is particularly important right now during COVID. Stories that you put out right now, we're just so desperate for sensorial activity in our lives. And one of the great things, like I said, is that the brain can be activated so beautifully from just reading stories. So your stories about a different place, a different space, different time, no matter what purpose they're for, if they're for work, if they're for personal, experiences, we need them to have, to be rich with senses. Also, it's very satisfying as a reader. Also, and I read this really incredible piece on this a couple years ago, in our society, we're slowly getting starved of sensorial activity. One of the problems is we go from a house or an apartment, whatever, into a car. And both of those spaces are spaces without very many smells and or stimuli, hearing. Smell is a big one. People that used to walk all the time, if you're someone who walks a lot, you get a ton more sensorial experiences, and definitely smells are one of them. I live in the city, so a lot of smells. And that is an incredible thing for a human. So I want us to do an exercise that taps into that. And that will also include you standing up if you want to. If not, stay seated. But otherwise, I want you to stand up. Okay. If you can, because we're going to close our eyes, lean against something. If you can't, just, I don't want you to fall over. So you can hold on to something, whatever you do. I have a chair right here, so I'm just going to lean against that. But I want you to close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Now I want to see if you can smell anything around you. The truth is, once you've been in a room for a while, your nose goes dead to those smells. So you might not be able to, but just take a second, see if you can smell anything. Okay, let's move to hearing. What can you hear? Now, touch your shoulder. Think of a few words that describe that touch. Now, touch your head. Hair if you have it, your scalp if you don't, and just feel what that feels like, and a few words that describe that. Now, before you open your eyes, I want you to consider the inside of your mouth. Do you taste anything? Is there a little bit of bitterness on the edge of your tongue, a little bit of lunch? Maybe something else. Now open your eyes, and I want you to look around the room you're in. What colors do you see? What do you notice that maybe you haven't noticed in a while? Are there any shapes around you? Now just for 1 sec, bring all that back to your body and feel if there are any sensations in your body anywhere. Some of us, that makes us itch. The minute that we feel like I start to just kind of realize I have an itch. Okay, that's fantastic. You can go ahead and sit down again. Thanks for doing that. So did anything come up for you in any way?
For me, right off the bat, I thought I wasn't feeling my coffee today and maybe needed another cup. But as soon as my eyes were closed and I was touching my shoulder and my head, I realized I have coffee jitters running through me that felt really tangible.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
That's an excellent point. We get into a certain habit, right? You think I need more coffee. And when you tap into the body, you realize, no, actually, I'm great. Anybody else? Anything else you noticed, felt, anything surprising to you?
When you'd ask us to feel what's inside your body, I felt more alive. I felt more energized.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just like Jen said, and I think that is probably the most common answer I get is I felt alive in a way I didn't know I was. That's really interesting. So the reason I go through that exercise, even though that's technically not a writing exercise, is because we crave that. Just like Rick said, just like Jennifer said, we feel more alive when we feel those senses, and that's what you want your reader to feel. It's one of the reasons your reader actually goes there, picks reading that's kind of stimulating in that way, is it makes us feel kind of fantastically alive. So this is especially important for stories of place the reader's never been, like we've mentioned, different cultures, again, because of COVID. So I wanted to read you just a few examples of some sensorial writing so that you have a good sense of it. Obviously, we know it when we see it. And another quick point is not every single piece of writing is going to be like this for you. Sorry, not every part of your writing. Let's say you're writing an article or an essay, something for work. This equally applies to those situations. I have grant writers now that add sensorial writing into their grants, and they are way more successful in grant writing because people don't want to read boring writing. We want to feel alive. So this can apply to absolutely anything. And the other thing I want to say, it not only can apply to absolutely everything, but it doesn't, you're not going to have every single piece of your writing be this way. It would be like eating chocolate cake all day long, right? What you want is I'm going to eat a salad, then I'm going to eat a piece of cake, then I'm going to go do something else, then I'm going to eat another piece of cake, right? So just remember that it's not that you have to trick out all your writing this way, but you have to make sure when you go back to that architect phase that you have some major sensorial writing somewhere, some scene, some scenes that do this. So let me read just a few to give us kind of a good sense of this. Here's an example from Over There by Scott Carrier. We stay with Najabullah's uncle and his family. They live in a blighted proletarian housing complex. The exterior walls pocked by bullet holes. The stairways fetid with decaying waste. Electrical wires ruptured out of circuit boxes like burnt snakes. Again, one of the things I love that he did here, he doesn't have to say there's a burning smell, but he's saying like burnt snakes, so he gives you both images. Again, parts of our brain light up that would be olfactory, right? As if we were smelling it. Another example is from Love in the Time of Cholera. Actually, I'm going to read you another one because I have something else from Love in the Time of Cholera in just a minute. But another example is from A Cup of Cuban Coffee by Stephen Benz. He says, more than anything, Havana was to me a city of faces. School children in their red and white uniforms peered at passersby through the iron bars of the mansion-turned schoolhouse. An old man sat on a seawall staring into the bright waves where his fishing line bobbed. A cigar-smoking crone sat on a box outside the cathedral, instructing tourists how best to photograph her. At night, I observed a hotel guard yawning and watching the prostitutes across the street who swayed to the music from the hotel disco. So, as you can see in those, you don't have to say there was the smell of a cigar. You say smoking a cigar and we go there, right? We do it ourselves. So just vividly describing something that would be a sensorial experience for us takes us there. Any questions on that before we move on? Anything you'd want to explore there? Okay, feel free to jump in anytime. So awesome. Yay. So after hyping the senses, we get to something, oh gosh, I love this topic so much, which is, and this is one a lot of people miss, which is embed universal themes. So let's go to the next slide and I'll show you some of what I mean. So universal themes are love, longing, revenge, here, redemption, jealousy, anger, anything that crosses all cultural divides. Now, any of you who are from a different culture than the American culture can understand that not all universal themes are equal everywhere, right? So America has the very I'm independent and I do whatever I want and don't tell me what to do theme, and other communal cultures not as much. That doesn't mean that theme doesn't resonate with people. It just might not resonate as wide. But of course, we all have these to some level. I have a beautiful friend, Sahar, which I know someone in this workshop knows well. And she loves songs of longing and poems of longing. Those don't resonate with me at all. I can tell they're beautiful, but they don't resonate with me. I love songs of just unbridled joy. She doesn't, those don't resonate with her. She can tell they're beautiful. So it doesn't mean every one of your readers is going to attach to every universal theme you pick. But if you don't pick a universal theme, I can almost guarantee nobody resonates with it. And this is a big problem because I was on a boat one time in Alaska, and the captain was telling me, I have all these great stories. I can't write a book. One time this person threw up in my cabin and this is what happened. And then another time this happened. And what I said to him, that's great. And people will like that, but they won't love it unless you have a universal theme. So if you can have the first chapter be about all the people that overcame anger on your boat or had anger issues, and then the next thing can be all about people who had love trauma, those we stay in for. And I can't tell you why. If you're a psychologist, chime in and tell us why. But for some reason, it's just true. And I want to give a little nod or a shout out to personal transformation as a universal theme. we all want it and we all love it. And I think it's probably because we just desperately want to believe we can change and that the world can change. So if that is a theme that you can weave into your story, please do. It sings to most of us. That's one of the bizarre critiques of Harry Potter, is that he doesn't actually change throughout the story. That said, I love Harry Potter. So anyway, but most short stories, most stories of any kind have some universal theme. Often it's personal transformation. So, and these can be, don't get me wrong, you don't pick one, right? Personal transformation through love, through jealousy, through anger, right? Jealousy can be redemptive. Anger can be used effectively. Any theme you want, but don't forget that. Again, not the first phase, second phase, third phase of writing. Consider, am I weaving these together with a theme? And pick one of these universal themes and people will love it. Okay, so yes, remember tool 2, which is you don't have to tell us that theme. As a matter of fact, you probably shouldn't. Now, that said, love in the time of cholera, the very first line is, it was inevitable. The scent of bitter almonds always reminded him of the fate of unrequited love. So he's telling you, like, right from the beginning, hey, the universal theme, unrequited love. It's what the whole book is going to be about. So, you know, you can get away with it if you're Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I don't know if the rest of us can really get away with that. So in other words, just weave it in, right? Images, scenes that represent that, but you don't have to say it. Great. I want to give you a little test. See if you can figure out what the universal theme is in this sense, and also where it's from. I think you can guess where it's from. But Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Can anybody tell me one, where it's from and or what theme that is? I know Jennifer knows where it's from because she's obsessed with these books. Jennifer, where is it from?
That, of course, is from Harry Potter.
It is indeed. Okay, so can anybody else give what universal theme you're hearing in that? Yeah, Jen.
The desire to be always to be normal and not be different.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too, Rick. Like something like judgment or feeling judged,
right,
by society and trying to fit in.
Now, what I'm obsessed with J.K. Rowling. So one of the reasons that I think she's so brilliant is what she did in that first sentence is both. She tapped into our desire to not be judged and not stand out and be normal, and our desire to be unique at the same time, right? We get this, yes, don't fit in all that. And wait a minute, we don't want to be like them. Thank you very much, right? She puts it in a way that didn't sound like someone we'd want to be. So that's a way you just weave it in a way that we discover it ourselves. We as the readers go, I get what's happening here. This is, a desire to be normal. Fantastic. Okay, let's move on. I want to make sure I allow enough time for questions and stuff. This is a very key thing that many people don't remember. And one of the reasons we as editors send things back, and again, this is fiction or nonfiction, doesn't matter. We expect, as the reader, whether we know it or not, a story arc. And most people don't recognize, they go along writing a story, which is really cool, except they don't recognize they've kind of violated some of the rules. Again, rules are made to be broken, but you have to know them first. Some of the rules we think of as in a good story, the process of a good story. So if you go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about Freytag. You guys might not know Freytag very well. So this is Freytag's pyramid. Really, it doesn't look like a pyramid, but that's what it's called. In 1863, he was this novelist who decided, wait a minute, I see these patterns. All these stories do this same thing. Good stories is what he felt. And so he came up with this idea of how it should go. So let's explore those just for a second. You've got exposition. Exposition is you're setting it up, right? Then you have rising action. Things start to heat up a little bit. They start to increase in some way. Now, often there's the inciting incident. I don't know that he put that in there. They've attributed this to him, but I haven't seen it attributed, but that is now very, very common. There's some inciting incident. Then there's the climax. We're gonna have a little fun seeing if you can identify these in something. So that's coming in just a sec, but it's harder than you think to tell what is the climax of something. And then there's falling action. Climax is resolve. Climax is the space where most of the intense things are happening and there's some turning point, some pivotal turning point. Then there's falling action, meaning things are getting resolved. You're figuring out how people are going to live with the situation that just came about in the climax. And then there's resolution. It's really just tying everything up with a bow. So real quick, by a show of hands, who has watched Bridgerton? Okay, a few of you, thank you. My husband would have to admit it because I made him watch it. It's, by the way, the second most popular thing on Netflix right now is Bridgerton. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about I'm going to use that as a paradigm. If you haven't watched it, run, don't walk. Don't leave this workshop, but I mean after, run, don't walk. So in Bridgerton, the exposition is that it's Old England. Now, it's Old England with a twist that is not historically accurate that you'll come to find out, but they have to set that up. They have to show you the environment. There's a situation happening in England that is not true, wasn't historically true. So they have to tell you otherwise you're going to be confused. They have to tell you what's going on. So they do that. Rising action, the young woman and the Duke both have different interests. The young woman feels like she's not getting the kind of attention she needs to get a good husband. The Duke doesn't want to marry at all. He's getting too much attention by all the moms and all the young women. So that's the tension that's rising. They make an agreement that they're going to pretend that they're together. So everybody kind of leaves them, well, they leave him alone. They're more interested in her. Somehow that's true. When a woman's with someone, they're more interested. So that's the rising action. It's beautifully done. And then the climax comes. And the climax comes in the rising action, they get together. They actually end up marrying because of a weird incident. The climax is what's going to happen. He doesn't really want to be married, doesn't want a family because of some bizarre vow he's made. So they have to decide what they're going to do. Are they going to be happy? Are they going to choose to be happy or are they not? I'm not going to tell you the choice. The falling action is resolving that, saying what happened, how did they come to terms with that decision? And the resolution is all the little tiny things tied up, like who is this mysterious woman who's been writing about everybody? So that's an example of it, but I'm also going to give you guys a chance to practice this in kind of a fun way. So look at this if you can while we're playing. We're going to play a song for you. The song is from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, if you've ever seen that show. And we're going to play the song and you get a chance to try and figure out what the stage is of, and particularly try to focus on the climax, which again, harder than you think. Jen's going to cue up that song in 1 sec. And it might do a little ad or something at first.
Some beat reading.
Can everybody hear it and see it okay?
Okay, people are nodding. Everybody, unmute if you can't see this or hear it.
This is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there. I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel-Air. In West Philadelphia, born and raised on the playground is where I spent most of my days. Chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool and all, shooting some b-ball outside of the school. When a couple of guys who were up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood. I got in one little fight and my mom got scared and said, "You're moving with your auntie and uncle in Bel-Air." I begged and pleaded with her day after day, but she packed my suitcase and sent me on my way. She gave me a kiss and then she gave me my ticket. I put my Walkman on and said I might as well kick it. First class, yo, this is bad. Drinking orange juice out of a champagne glass. Is this what the people of Bel Air living like? This might be all right. But wait, I hear the prissy, bourgeois and all that. Is this the type of place that they just send this cool cat? I don't think so. I see when I get there. I hope they're prepared for the Prince of Bel Air.
I noticed you noticing me. So I just want to put you on notice that I noticed you too. And to let you know that I might consider letting you be with me.
That would pass us for a compliment around here?
Look, baby, listen.
No, you listen. If you want a shot at being with me, maybe you should try talking to me like a human being, okay?
The plane landed, and when I came out, there was a dude look like a cop standing there with my name out. I ain't trying to get arrested yet. I just got here. I sprang with the quickness like lightning disappeared. I whistled for a cab, and when it came near, the license plate said fresh and it had dice in the mirror. If anything, I can say that this cab was rare, but I thought, man, forget it. Yo, home's the Bel Air. I pulled up to the house about 7 or 8, and I yelled to the cabin, yo, home, smell you later. Looked at my kingdom, I was finally there to sit on my throne as the Prince of Bel Air.
Okay, awesome, Jay. Thank you. Okay, really harder than you think, right? Anybody want to take a stab at identifying any of those things from Freytag's triangle? And will you bring those back up so people can see those, that past slide? Any ideas?
The exposition was at the very beginning, saying, I'm going to tell you how I ended up in Bel Air.
Exactly.
The inciting incident was the fight on the playground with the bad guys. And then you have rising action in terms of him arriving and all the stuff that's going on. I'll let somebody else take it from there.
Yeah, there's a reason. The climax in this one is very hard to spot, and I'll tell you about it later if no one gets it. But any other ideas? Any ideas what the climax might be? So the thing that's challenging is the sound and the video weren't quite synced in that. So the climax is actually a moment where he gets it, he's approaching the cab and he says something like, "Hey, this cab is rare," meaning like we could do something different, right? We could go someplace else. And he goes, no, we'll go to Bel Air, right? And so even though climax, we're used to identifying the climax as most of the action, and that's generally true, it doesn't always have to be true. It is the moment where a huge decision is made and everything has been leading up to that decision. And so when he approaches the cab and basically says, maybe I can admit, no, let's go home to Bel Air. That's where the climax is. And the falling action is when he gets there, he's going to knock on the door. And then we're going to see what happens. We're going to see whether they greet him, kind of the resolution of that, of all that. So the reason I love this, it's used actually a fair amount to show these different elements of the story arc. But the reason I love this is because climax is not always something that we think of. So remember, it's that moment where something is decided and they really make that ultimate choice. Okay, any questions on story arc? Let me give them just a moment. Everybody a moment to anything applying it to what you're doing that might be tricky or hard. Okay, I'm going to take that as you guys are getting it and you're rock star students. Okay, I'm going to go on to, we only have 3 more. The last 2 pretty quick. So I'm going to spend a fair amount of time on this next one, which is point of view. So the next tool is consider switching point of view. Now I'm going to talk to you for a sec about point of view. You may be an expert on this, but a lot of people have only a vague sense of point of view. And one particular thing about third person point of view that people are a little vague on. So one of my people, there are 3 points of view. There's first person, which is I. There's second person, which is you. And that may seem strange that you could possibly tell a story from that point of view, but we'll talk about why you would want to do that. And then there's third person, which is he, she, and they. And they, of course, I mentioned, we used to never mention that because it used to be only the plural of he and she, but now it's not anymore. It can be its own singular. So all of those are third person. Now, it seems a little strange for me to talk about this given that you guys are writing your stories. So wouldn't you normally speak from I? But I think someone mentioned right in the beginning this sense of not wanting to take someone else's story. It's often called, if you're writing internationally or cross-culturally, about cultural appropriation is the term. And so we're being more and more sensitive to the idea that we may not want to write in our voice and draw attention to us as the narrator and deflect that. So even though you're writing your story, you can consider writing it from a second person or third person point of view. Let me talk about second for just a second. Second is you. So in other words, the entire story says you. You walk into a building. You look around, you don't see anything you like, you walk out. Now, it's almost never done in popular stories, but there is a pretty famous book, Bright Lights, Big City. So if you want to check out how you is done in an entire novel, that's an interesting one. That's all written from second person point of view. So the most common for adult fiction writing is third person point of view, he, she. So if you choose, though, and you may, again, because of this danger of cultural appropriation, if you do decide to do something, anything from a third person point of view, and again, one of the tricks is you're supposed to stay with one. So unless you are a brilliant writer, which there are some out there, Sadie Smith, I think might be her last name. Anyway, she does it all the time. You don't switch, right? If you pick one, you stay with one. And the trick is, this is something that most people don't really have a keen awareness of, is that third person point of view used to look very different. So third person used to be this omniscient narrator. So a narrator that says, this person is thinking this and that person is thinking that. And it's like, it's still very much done in science fiction, but that's hardly ever done anymore out of those realms, out of a science fiction realm or some kind of bizarre writing experiment. Now, third person is written as close. It's called close third, which means you have a main character and the whole story is written through the eyes of that character, but not an I, right? Not their, so you don't say I, but you'd say, for example, let's say John's a vampire, right? You'd say, John walked into the room, smelled blood, right? Everything is said as if the perspective is that main character. And the reason is we like getting to know someone intricately, frankly, and we want to feel closer. And so we've evolved to using this close third. So just wanted people to be aware of that is, if you decide to write an omniscient third, you have to have a real good reason for it. Most editors will send it back and say, this is not close third. Okay, but however, you will most likely do I, right? You're writing your story. So why might you not want to use I? I think one of the big reasons you might not want to use I is if you're trying to take the focus off you. You're writing about a different culture, a different place, and you really want to take your perspective out of it. So even though it's your story, you can still write it from a third person point of view. You can describe yourself in a third person way. Rick, I'm going to say, works for this certain place and he does this kind of thing and he traveled and he went to, you can write it as if you're not that person. So just that's something to consider when you are looking at how to tell a story. Again, you don't have to do it from the beginning. You can write stuff and then look at it and say, is there another point of view that actually works better for this story? So that's kind of fun to mess with. Anybody have any questions on that point of view? I'm going over really quickly, and I know it's a complicated topic. Anybody have any thoughts or ideas, questions on that?
I have a question, and I don't know, this might be getting too far into the weeds, but I did gender and ethnic studies in my undergrad, and so everything in feminist methodology is acknowledging you and your I and your bias and your vision. And so, like, especially in relation to international development, recognizing I'm writing this from my point of view. This is completely my bias. It might be appropriating, it might not be fully understanding the big picture, but this is what I understood at that time. So like, I guess, what are your thoughts on that in the sense of wanting to tell other people's stories, but it's ultimately through your lens and you are biased? And my
Yes.
methodological training is all in feminist research. And so,
And you're 100% right. It is increasingly tricky because we're trying maybe to take eye out of it, but at the same time, as Shannon just said, acknowledge that I'm only one observer. And so again, I think one of the most beautiful ways you can do that, if you're gonna use I, which is very common and most people expect that if it's your story, is that you embed humbleness within that. You can say things like overtly, like I realize that I'm only one observer and all that. On the other hand, you can just embed it. So you can say things like, although I had only been there 2 days or 3 weeks, this is what I saw. You know, you can embed phrases and comments that let the reader know that you appreciate that you don't know the whole picture and you weren't raised there, you weren't, you know. So that's probably my best advice. You can use second person. I had a situation where I was telling a story about my mom, and it was really her story. I mean, we had been in a freezing car in Alaska overnight, 75 degrees below zero. At that time, it was the coldest in North American history. And I was only 4, so I didn't really remember that much about it. And I really wanted to tell this story that meant a lot to me. So I used second person, you, and really the you was describing my mom and her experience. It sounds like I'm just talking to the reader, but eventually, because of what I'm describing, they understand that I'm describing a character, right? You pull on your fur coat, you're still shaking. Right? So obviously it's specific enough. So that's one thought, is that you can play with you and see if you gives enough distance so that you're not sounding as much like you're trying to own someone else's story or voice. Excellent question. Anything else? Anybody else?
That made me think of my favorite books, which is The Hitchhiker's Guide, and they use sort of a far away omniscient perspective, which I wonder could also be appropriate considering Shannon's comment in some places, where that far away narrator can say, she did this thing. It wouldn't be until years later that she realized that that had this effect or that had this connotation.
That's a really good point. And actually, I hadn't thought of how that far away omniscient, which again is so rare nowadays, it's mostly sci-fi and Hitchhiker's Guide, you know, considered sci-fi, could be used that way. I love it. I think that's a really great idea to play with. One of the fun things about point of view is play with it, right? Even write a paragraph, then write it in a different point of view. See if it does something totally different to you. I think there's something in the chat. I think you're probably keeping on those, but I want to make sure people who say things in chats get acknowledged as well. Okay, so any other questions on point of view? I know we're running short on time. Okay, we're gonna go to tool 7 because I want to make sure you get them all. So tool 7 is revise, is always revise. This is really, really important. And a lot of people, especially my students, feel that this is a punishing phase. And it's, again, I don't love that the judge can be harsh in this phase, because actually this can be so your friend, revision, especially if you read it out loud and show it to someone else. Showing it to someone else is really kind of great. Also in revision, and I think it's in this next tool, is that you can, it's not your fault that you need revision, because frankly, showing it to someone else is fantastic because you don't know what's obvious to you but not obvious to your reader. Let me just give you one brief example. I wrote a story one time in which my children were intricately involved, and they were little at the time. And the fact that they were little was really important. And I didn't put the ages of my children in that. And the editor sent it back and said, how old are your kids, right? But that's so known to me that it was inconceivable that anybody doesn't know that, right? I just had missed that. So there's so many things that you take for granted, especially culturally, that others outside your head and outside your culture wouldn't. So it's fantastic if you can show to someone else at this stage. And I know sometimes we're like, these are our babies and I don't want criticism. I think we need to reframe that. It's really not criticism. It's someone outside your head giving you a piece of information that you just couldn't have seen. Also, it's a great point to think of your audience. If you've been writing and you've had a great thing and you realize, darn it, my audience is someone who isn't going to like this point of view, or they're not going to like how long it is, or they're not going to like this. I mean, that's another chance to bring audience in. Again, you can have the most fantastic piece and you have the wrong audience and it just falls flat. So really bringing that back in at several stages, that's kind of why I've mentioned it a few times, is a good point. Anything on revision that people want to ask or bring up?
Hi. When do you seek someone's input on something like that? Is it when you are, halfway through, or you're 10% of the way through, or you wait till you're completely through?
Michael, that is such a good question. It's hard. The editor in me has two answers. One is when you feel complete, when you feel like I think it's good, right? And then, you show it to people. And I once sent away a novel manuscript and the editor sent it back saying, I really love this. And then everything was red. And I was like, but what do you do if you don't like it? This looks horrible. So I would say when you feel you're done is kind of the best time. The problem is the other side of me wants to say never. And the reason I want to say never, even though I'm giving you the opposite advice, is people will give you really different feedback. One person will say, I don't like your main character, or I don't like the approach, or, and another person will say, this is the perfect approach. So the answer to that is when you do, make sure it's a trusted person, a person that is either an editor or someone that can take themselves out of it and say, Michael's not writing to me. Michael's writing to a totally different audience. So I can read it from that perspective. But I would say when you feel, good, this feels like I'm done, probably isn't done until you show it to someone else.
So my question is, I think it was around the same question that was asked, but maybe slightly different. In particular, I was wondering what kind of criteria you would use to pick someone who would give you feedback. Other than being trusted, are there like, you want them to not have that experience, or you want them to have, like, let's say someone is writing and something on an international experience. Do you want someone with that background or without that background? How would you kind of bring that in?
That's an excellent question. And I would say the answer is you want your audience, like someone that is closest to your audience to read that. And also someone who can take themselves out of it. And this really one of the hardest things as an editor and stuff we're trained at is to say, wait a minute, I can pull my own thoughts and my own biases away from this. And again, it might be you're still the audience, like the person might be writing to someone just like me, but we still need to take our own fears, concerns, biases, and make sure that we're not projecting those onto this story. Maybe you don't love strong male characters, right? And so you need to be able to say, wait a minute, that's just me, right? That's not everyone. So it's a little bit tricky.
Is there something that you could do to set that up for whoever you give it to review? Like, this is what I want. These are things I want you to look out for.
Yes, that's absolutely perfect that you just said that. So the two terms that I would say will come in handy for you is global revision versus local revision. So what you're asking, it can be totally different depending on those two. So global revision is big stuff. You're saying, do you even like this story? Do you even like the way I've set it up? Do you like the point of view? It's kind of these big level stuff. And then there's local, which is, does that sentence read right? Does that intro work, right? So it's very important to ask people for what kind of editing you want, what kind of feedback, because sometimes and you've probably had this experience, you pass it to someone and they give you kind of feedback that you're not looking for. You don't need to know where the commas are. You want to know, does it even work, right? So global revision and local revision. So I would set that up for the person. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last but not least is read. And I know this can sound really obvious, but we as professors have recently come to the conclusion, kind of duh, that these two are so intricately combined that you really can't do one without the other. So the good news is, because you guys are probably all readers, the next time you are reading, don't think I'm blowing off at work or I'm wasting time. You are making yourself a better writer. Absolutely, no question about it. So there are a couple ways I'm talking about. You can either read to read and just to experience stuff, and that's fantastic. Also, you can find on that same level, you can find things that you writing that you want to do. Fantastic to look at other people's examples of the kind of writing you want to do. You want to do travel writing? Pick up a travel writing book. They have the 100 best. Actually, I think I have it. Oh, I have it here. This comes out every year. The best American travel writing by Ian Fraser. That editor was that day. So anything you want to do, there's a book, an example of it. Pick it up, find what you like, find what you don't like. So that's one level. And then another type of reading. And the other type is reading about your craft. So I have listed just a few that I think are pretty amazing. Bird by Bird by Annie Lamott, Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg, Everybody Writes by Anne Hanley. So these are about craft. And don't forget that you don't have to rewrite the book, literally. You can read how other people have done this and get inspiration that way. And please do that because it's fun and it helps you to not have to stumble around so much, right? We actually have great books on how to write. And then Jen has also added at the end of this little nod to something.
Yeah, I wanted to do a quick plug for our literature section on the GlobalPDX members portal. If you're not already in the members portal, it's a great collection of all of these resources we have. And there's also a space where you can share literature that was impactful for you that you'd recommend other people would share. And all of these recommendations by Kym are going to be in that members portal. If you have any questions about that, feel free to email me.
Awesome. So I just want to say, before I answer any questions, I'm so excited for you guys to give yourself some time to dance through the daisies and don't let the judge in at that point, or even before, as the other person said. And your story is unique and we need to hear it. So thank you so much for being willing to come here and being willing to explore how to do that in a really effective way. And I know I've given you a ton in such a short period of time. This is like an MFA program in an hour and a half. So thank you for all that you've had to absorb and just for being such gracious workshop participants. So any questions, I'm happy to stay as long as people want and answer things and fire away.
I just want to say thanks, Kym. This has been terrific. You did put a lot into a short period of time.
Much.
And I have a question for Jennifer. How did you ever find this person and talk her into doing this?
I love that I used my in connection to get her here, but
yeah, good for you.
She's always been just my favorite writer and my favorite reader of my own writing. And I saw her teach a class and I thought, man, this is one hell of an expert. How do I get her into GlobalPDX Lunch and Learn? And I'm so happy she agreed.
Very cool.
Thank you, Rick,
Wonderful.
so much. Anybody else want any questions or anything you want to say?
Hi, this is Brian. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks again for this. It's very helpful. Going back to the thing about reading, and also the title of the presentation on mission-driven writing. What would you recommend as examples of good mission-written writing?
Mission-driven writing. Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And of course, it kind of depends on your mission, which is, clarified by you, really. But there are some beautiful stories. I mean, I'm a real fan of short stories right now. I don't know if that's because I have so much going on that my attention span is shorter. But if I would look at the focus of what you actually want to write about, and that can go back to the universal themes. It can go back to certain countries. One of my favorite books about cross-cultural and mission-driven is The Spaces in Between, I believe it's called. Jenna might be able to Google that. It's a story about a Scottish soldier who walks across Afghanistan. And they all tell him everybody tells him you're going to die, right? There's no way you're going to walk across Afghanistan. And he does, and what he learns and what he experiences. And so that kind of story where you're trying to get people to understand other cultures, I think is just amazing and beautiful. But so that's the long answer. The short answer is you'd have to find what your particular mission is and do that and read that kind of example, unless you're asking what are good ones, craft talk type stuff. Are you asking what, like how?
I'm asking, like you were saying a moment ago, you know, like here's 100 great travel books. Okay.
Yeah.
Are there 3, 4, 5 well recognized books, nonfiction books that describe a mission driven, you know, situation? The one I don't think I even read it, but the one that comes to mind is 3 Cups of Tea.
I know I was about to mention that one. The reason I
Okay.
didn't say that one is he got in a bit of trouble.
I know.
Yeah, but I almost said that one because I did love that one. Gosh, when I love a book, sometimes that author can go down hard sometimes. So yeah, I mean that was that's a really good one, right?
Okay, so are there other examples that you know are nonfiction, have that universal theme in it? You know, here I don't remember that much about it, but the guy goes somewhere else and he's writing about what's going on there, so
Right.
he has to have that point of view. So are there other
ones that are amazing?
like, yeah, even like Mark Twain went across the country and wrote about going cross country, and Dickens wrote about coming to America.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say there are a ton. The problem is the question is, what do you like, right? What's your, I mean, interestingly enough, Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, was also a travel writer and did it in a really funny way. So if you're drawn to something that's really, really funny, then that's the kind of thing you would love. But I don't have one that I just think everybody would like. So I think the best advice I have on that is to Google maybe the country you're interested in or the kind of story you like and see what comes up. I mean, I hate to reference you just, refer you to just Google, but I think it will get you closer to what you're looking for in particular.
Also, I know for a fact there's a couple on the member portal. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I'm happy to connect you there. We've had some really cool recommendations of people within the Global PDX network who've written books focused on their organization and their mission. So
great. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, one more. I think we have time, but I promised I wasn't going to keep you over. So one more quick question. Anybody? You guys have been amazing. Thank you. Wow. I think my contact information is there somewhere. So honestly, if you have a follow-up question or something you think of later, feel free to email me. Happy to answer it.
Yeah, thanks to all of you so much for engaging with us today. It was a really fantastic session. Thanks so much, Kym. And we hope to see you all again in our next Lunch and Learn session, which is going to be around decolonizing your organization and your business's structure and working with racial equality. And it's led by a really fantastic speaker. So I hope all of you can be engaged then. Global PDX is always around for you. Keep us posted on what kind of sessions you want to see in 2021. And we'll look forward to seeing you then.
All right. Take care, you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, Sepide.